Victoria had always believed that life's most beautiful chapters were written when you least expected them. At 38, she had learned to embrace her independence, to find peace in her own company during quiet mornings with coffee, and to appreciate the freedom that came from answering only to herself. Her sister Karen had raised an eyebrow when Victoria announced her plans. 3 weeks at some mountain hostel? Vic, you could afford 5-star resorts. Why rough it with backpackers? But Victoria had smiled, the way women do when they've learned that luxury isn't always about thread counts and room service. Sometimes it's about authenticity and genuine human connection. The Alpine Ridge Hostel sat nestled against snow-dusted pines, a place where travelers gathered around worn wooden tables, sharing stories over steaming bowls of soup, their faces glowing in the amber light of the fireplace. Victoria had chosen it precisely because it felt real, unpretentious, the kind of place where people came to remember who they were beneath all the professional masks they wore in their daily lives. She noticed him on her second evening. Thomas, though she wouldn't learn his name until days later. He sat alone at the corner table, a distinguished man in his early 40s, with gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of quiet presence that suggested he'd learned the value of listening over speaking. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, and when he smiled, which he did often when others were talking, fine lines appeared around his eyes, the kind that come from years of genuine warmth. He dressed simply worn jeans, comfortable sweaters, sturdy hiking boots that had clearly walked many miles. His backpack sat beside him like an old friend, practical and well-used, filled with what Victoria assumed were the modest belongings of someone who'd chosen experience over possessions. He's been here longer than most, explained Elena, the hostel's owner, as they watched Thomas help an elderly German couple with their luggage. Quiet fellow, but kind. Yesterday he spent 2 hours teaching that young father from Denver how to repair his hiking boots. Victoria found herself drawn to Thomas's gentle manner. He never dominated conversations, but when he spoke, people leaned in to listen. His voice carried the soft cadence of someone from the Midwest, perhaps Wisconsin or Minnesota, with that particular warmth that comes from people who understand that winters are long and neighbors matter. During the day, Victoria explored mountain trails that wound through forests of pine and aspen, breathing air so clean it seemed to wash years of corporate stress from her lungs. As a marketing executive, she was used to constant demands, endless meetings, the relentless pace of city life. Here, time moved differently, measured by sunrise and sunset rather than conference calls and deadlines. In the evenings, she settled into the hostel's common room, where Thomas would often be found reading near the fire, occasionally looking up to offer help with a crossword clue or share a quiet observation about the day's weather. Their first real conversation happened on a Tuesday evening, when Victoria was struggling with a particularly stubborn jar of jam. Thomas appeared beside her with a gentle smile. Sometimes these mountain altitudes make everything a bit more challenging, he said, easily opening the jar with hands that were surprisingly strong. Even the simple things. Thank you, Victoria replied, struck by the kindness in his eyes. I'm Victoria, by the way. Though I suppose after a week, we should probably introduce ourselves properly. Thomas, he said, and his handshake was warm and steady. I've been meaning to say hello, but you always seem so peaceful in your reading corner. I didn't want to intrude on your mountain sanctuary. They began sharing evening conversations by the fire. Thomas spoke thoughtfully about the books he carried, philosophical works mixed with poetry and the occasional mystery novel. He asked about Victoria's life with genuine curiosity, listening as she described her career in marketing, her love of creative campaigns that told meaningful stories, her decision to take this extended break after years of thinking someday might never come. There's something beautiful about stepping away from the noise, Thomas said one evening, gazing into the dancing flames. My mentor used to say that we spend so much time climbing ladders, we forget to look around and see if we're climbing the right wall. Victoria noticed things about him. The way he always ensured the elderly guests had the warmest seats near the fire. How he would quietly slip extra tip money to Elena when he thought no one was looking. The patient way he helped a young backpacker from Australia plan safer routes through the more challenging trails. He has this calming presence, Victoria wrote in her journal one night. In my world, everyone's always performing, always on. But Thomas just is. There's no pretense, no agenda, just genuine kindness. As her 3-week stay drew toward its end, Victoria felt an unexpected sadness. She had grown to treasure their evening conversations, the comfortable silences they could share, the way Thomas would save her favorite spot by the window each morning, somehow knowing exactly where she liked to sit with her coffee and watch the sunrise paint the mountains gold. On her last evening, Thomas seemed different. There was an energy about him, a nervous excitement that made Victoria wonder if he was planning his own departure. After dinner, he approached her with a shy smile. "Victoria, I was wondering if you'd like to take a short walk with me tomorrow morning. Before you leave, there's someone I'd like you to meet." The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Victoria packed her bags slowly, reluctant to close this peaceful chapter of her sabbatical. When she met Thomas outside, she was surprised to see him leading her not toward the mountain trails, but toward the hostel's small landing area where a helicopter sat waiting, its rotors still and silent in the morning air. A man in a pilot's uniform stepped forward. He was perhaps in his 30s, with Thomas's same gentle eyes and warm smile. "Dad," he said, embracing Thomas warmly. "She's even more beautiful than you described." Victoria stood frozen, her mind slowly processing the scene. The helicopter, the pilot calling Thomas Dad. The expensive-looking equipment she now noticed wasn't quite standard backpacker gear. Thomas turned to her, his expression tender and slightly apologetic. "Victoria, I'd like you to meet my son, David. And I'm not exactly the penniless backpacker I might have appeared to be." The truth unfolded gently. Thomas Richardson was the founder of a sustainable technology company, someone who had spent decades building businesses that helped communities access clean water and renewable energy. His backpacking was actually his way of stepping away from board meetings and quarterly reports, seeking the simple connections that success had sometimes made complicated. "I never lied to you," he said quietly, his hand reaching for hers. "Everything I shared about who I am, about what matters to me, that was completely true. I didn't mention the rest." Victoria looked at this man who had spent 3 weeks washing dishes alongside other travelers, sharing simple meals, reading poetry by firelight, and felt her heart expand with understanding rather than surprise. The kindness was real. She said softly, "The conversations were real. The way you helped that young father fix his boots, that was real too." Thomas nodded, relief flooding his features. "I've spent months at hostels and small inns, meeting people who see me for who I am rather than what I've built. But you, Victoria, you made me remember what it feels like to share not just time with someone, but dreams and hopes and quiet moments that matter." He reached into his jacket pocket, producing a small velvet box. "I know this might seem sudden, but I've learned that when you find something real, you don't let it slip away because of timing or convention." Inside the box sat a simple, elegant ring, beautiful in its understated grace. "I'm not asking you to change your life," Thomas continued, his voice steady with quiet confidence. "I'm asking if you'd consider sharing it. Building something together, traveling together, maybe finding that balance between the simple joys we discovered here and whatever adventures call to us." Victoria looked at this gentle man who had chosen to live simply among strangers, who had shown kindness without expectation, who had listened to her stories as if they were precious gifts. The helicopter gleamed in the morning sun, a symbol not of wealth trying to impress, but of a man who could provide comfort and security while still valuing the simple magic of human connection. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying the certainty of someone who had learned to trust her instincts. "Yes, Thomas, I think I'd like that very much." As David prepared the helicopter for their flight, as Thomas slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly with joy, Victoria marveled at how life's most beautiful surprises often came disguised as ordinary moments. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with dramatic proclamations, but with quiet conversations by a fire, with gentle hands that help open stubborn jars, with hearts that recognize in each other the rare gift of authentic presence. The helicopter lifted them above the pine trees and snow-covered peaks, carrying them toward whatever chapter would unfold next. Two people who had found each other in the simplest way possible, by being genuinely, beautifully,